Okay, yesterday we were talking about giving the Torah. Yeah, it's close to the doors.
Rabbi, before we start,
Yeah.
I have a question about yesterday's class.
Sure.
So, I know you went at it, you explained at great detail that if it was an honest mistake, you can't be held technically liable for the mistake concerning, what was good yesterday may not be good today. But why would it be considered a mistake that had to be amended if it was good yesterday and it's not your fault that it was bad? Why would you have to make amends for that?
All right, so let me try to put this in a formula. In normal legal systems, when a decision is made, whether it's a legislative decision or a judicial decision, the decision applies from the time of the decision into the future.
Yeah.
So the law was one way, really one way. People who followed it did the right thing, and then from now on the law is different, and they have to behave in a different way. Everybody comes out good. Everybody comes out clean. People who followed it before are clean. People who followed the new law afterwards are clean. Jewish law isn't like that. In Jewish law, you're trying to get at some truth, and when the Sanhedrin makes a decision, it's a decision about what the truth is. They're not creating law. They're giving decisions that are supposed to reflect a reality. So when one Sanhedrin says the law is X, and later a Sanhedrin says the law is Y, they're saying it wasn't X in the past either. Saying X in the past was a mistake. So the people who followed X in the past were doing wrong. And that has to be rectified. It has to be rectified. Now, not always is the person who rectifies something the one who caused it or guilty for it. But his job is to rectify it. When firemen put out a fire, it's not because they set the fire. It's their job to put out fires.
Yeah.
So here, the person who performed it has a certain responsibility for rectifying it. The point that I made was he's not regarded as guilty because he did everything that he could possibly do under those conditions. He went to the Sanhedrin and got a decision from them. But he's the one, since he performed the action which in fact was wrong, he has to do something to make up for it. That's all.
And I know you said in the case that if the person's deceased that made the mistake before, pardon my pronunciation, the sufferer would do the sacrifice to rectify it for them, as they're not able to now?
I didn't speak about people being deceased, I don't think.
No, like for example, like if they did it in the past, or it's only applied to people that are alive in the present. They have to make amends.
No, you can't. You can't do that for a person who died. Again, since they're not guilty, so then there's nothing to be held against them if they die before the change is made, right? Because they're not guilty, they're not responsible. They're just chosen to be the ones to make some kind of amends. If they're not in the world, of course, they can't do it. So I don't think that's a problem. You're welcome. So now, we talked about the day of giving the Torah. We receive it. I want to talk about receiving a gift. Receiving a gift has a certain subtlety about it, a certain complexity about it. Let's say somebody gives me something. Well, there are two things I have to take into account. Number one, what can I do with it? In what way can I integrate it into my life and make it useful? The other thing I have to take into account is, what did the giver have in mind for me to do with it? After all, he gave it to me. I owe him a debt of gratitude. If I knew that he expected me to do something with it, and I just didn't take that into account whatsoever, didn't pay any attention to it, that would be a sign of a kind of ingratitude, kind of insensitivity. On the other hand, of course, if he wants me to do something with it and it doesn't fit into my priorities or my plans, I don't have to do what he expected me to do with it, but I might apologize. I might say, listen, I know that you intended to invest in this. You gave me a treadmill. Right, I travel a lot and I see how treadmills are used as clothes racks. or places to stack your unused books or something, right? And that's what the treadmill's for. Okay, I see you wanted to invest in my exercise, but it probably won't have that function. I hope this doesn't disappoint you, because I have to realize that's what he intended. Now, suppose that the one who gives it to me knows me very well. Suppose the one who gives it to me knows me better than I know myself. And suppose the one who gives it to me then wants this to improve my life, bring my life to a certain ideal. Well, then what he wants me to do with it will be very important. I'm not going to just use it in a way that integrates into my prior expectations or prior plans. I might even change my plans in those terms. Here there's a split in terms of attitudes towards the Torah between those who are faithful to the Torah and those who are not. And I'll illustrate this for you. Chaim Shmulevitz, great scholar of the mid to late 20th century, wrote a series of essays, and it's translated in English, absolutely marvelous essays. And he points out the following thing. In the book of Deuteronomy, Sefer Dvarim, it says twice, don't add or subtract from the Torah. And once, it says it in conjunction with a certain type of idol worship, which, Baal Peor, where the idol worship was, they had an idol, and the service, so to speak, of the idol was to defecate in front of the idol. It means the temple was really a bathroom. That's what it was. Okay, it's your world. You're a free person. You can do what you like. But that is a little odd. And then what would the connection between Baal Peor on the one hand and not adding and subtracting from the Torah on the other hand be? So he explained as follows. What's going on in that kind of practice? The thing which everybody worships, the thing that stands for the most important powers in the world, I use for my lowest degraded purpose. What's the message? The message is, I'm over it. It has to serve me. I don't serve it. It has to serve my lowest functions because I'm infinitely superior to it. That which you think is the top, I sit on. That's what gives him leave to use it in that degraded fashion. Okay, what's the attitude of a person who adds and subtracts from the Torah? Well, let's see. Here's what the Torah says. How does it fit in? How does it contribute to my life? I have a life. I have values. I have projects. I have priorities. I have goals. Will prayer lower my blood pressure? That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Will Shabbos give me more energy for the coming week so I'll be more creative and more competitive and earn more money? That's a good thing. Oh, then Shabbos is definitely worth it, and so forth and so on. Measuring the Torah as an aid to achieving values which are utterly distinct and independent and separate from the values of the Torah, because it's a tool to enhance my life. The attitude that the people who use Baal Peor and the attitude of the person who adds and subtracts from the Torah is exactly that. It has to fit into my lifestyle. Either it makes a good contribution or not. There was a group, I think they probably still exist, called Reconstructionism. Reconstructionism was founded by a fellow named Mordechai, I forgot his last name. He called it Reconstructionism because he said the following. The modern world has three sources of reality. One is modern philosophy, one is modern science. I would never have put philosophy over science, but okay. And the third is Judaism. Judaism is number 3. So whatever is of Judaism that can survive the critique of philosophy and science is worth having. Whatever can't, well, we have to reconstruct it in the image of those two higher sources of truth. Right? That means I'm committed to modern philosophy. I'm committed to science. You fit into my commitments. See if you measure up to my commitments. That attitude is not using the Torah the way the giver of the Torah intended it to be used. He intended the Torah to be used as a guideline to what is important, what is significant, what is meaningful, what is truly valuable, what is truly obligatory, what is truly fruitful, what is truly developmental, and not to integrate it into your prior commitments. I'll give you an example of how this works. Someone just said to me the other day, what would happen if you had money for all your needs? What would you do then? His thought was, well, I have needs, and if I use the money for my needs, that's reasonable. I'm using it for things that I'm committed to. But suppose I give you more. And he wanted to say such a person would be spoiled because he would have more money than he can use in a meaningful way. I said, maybe if you gave me more money than I are required to fulfill my needs, I would develop other needs. Maybe my picture of what needs to be done, what I can do, what's available to do is limited by my resources. When I have a surplus, I think, wow, I have this extra surplus. What shall I do with it? What's worthy of investing in? What will contribute to the world in the best way? So if I had 6 needs before the gift, now I'll have 7 needs, and I'll still be fulfilling my needs, but I'll have more needs. It'll impact me to change my picture of what my needs are. Same thing is true with the Torah. I want to illustrate this again with another thought, and I'll stop if you have questions or comments. I'll stop after I make this final point. Every rule limits your freedom. A rule tells you either you must do this or you mustn't do this. If you must do it, then there are times and places where you have to do it, and you don't have the option to do something else. If you mustn't do it, then even if you think you could get some profit out of doing it, you can't do it. Every rule limits freedom. But some rules, in addition to limiting freedom, create freedom. I'll give you some examples. Here's a rule. When you drive on the road, in the direction in which you're going, only the right half of the road, not the left half. 50% of the road is off limits. 50% of the road. Why would you deny me 50% of the road? It's very simple, because if you don't have that rule, nobody will go anywhere. Everybody will be driving haphazardly in all directions, and no one will get anywhere. By denying you 50%, it makes it possible to travel, which you didn't have that possibility. You didn't have that possibility before. Chess. We're playing a game of chess. I take my knight, I move it 3 spaces straight forwards, and I take off your queen. And you say, you can't do that. I say, sure I can. Watch, I'll do it again. 1, 2, 3, off with your queen. No problem. Yeah, but we're playing chess. You can't do that in chess. Don't tell me how to move my pieces. I'm a red-blooded American. Nobody pushes me around. I push my pieces the way I want to push my pieces. Yeah, you can do that, but if you do that, you can't play chess. You can push your pieces around, but you can't play chess. Only by accepting the restrictions of the rules, how to move the pieces, can you play the game. The rules make it possible to play the game. Without that, you can't play the game. So by accepting the restrictions, it opens up a possibility that you didn't have before. Okay, who cares about traffic and who cares about games? But here's something really important. Here's the red-blooded American again. Don't tell me how to talk. I talk the way I want. Here, and plus blue. That's how I talk. Okay. You can say those words, you can make those noises, but you can't communicate that way. If you don't follow the rules of language, you can't communicate because the words that you speak have no meaning. They don't express a thought. And of the infinity of different ways of combining the words in the language arbitrarily, a vanishingly small percentage of them are meaningful sentences. And if you don't accept those rules, you can't communicate. So, of course, almost all the combinations are off limits. But when you follow those rules, then you can communicate. So, there are rules that create new possibilities when you follow them that you wouldn't have if you didn't follow them. Even though, again, I'm stressing, I agree, all rules limit your freedom, but sometimes limiting your freedom creates a new possibility that you didn't otherwise have. That's the point of the rules of the Torah. The point of the rules of the Torah is to open up for you possibilities that you didn't have before. When we had Pesach, the title of the days of Pesach is Man Cheruseinu, the time of our freedom. In the Hebrew language, there are many different words for freedom, and they have different connotations. Cheruseinu is one of those words, and it's the same letters as the letters of engraving in stone. Chorus means engraved. Chorus al-Luchos, the words of the 10 pronouncements of Sinai, were engraved on the stone tablets. Why would a word for freedom also be the word for engraving? So my Rabbi Zatzal explained that the freedom that we have is a freedom to go to Sinai to receive the Torah. The Torah is rules that are engraved in stone, not to be flipped around because it happens to be Los Angeles in 2025, and over there people are doing other things. But following those rules gives you a certain freedom that you wouldn't otherwise have. This is the freedom to develop your spirituality. It's a freedom to come to live in terms of an ultimate reality, to realize where the world's coming from and where it's going, and who's available to you in order to share with you that journey of developing in the way that the Torah gives you the opportunity to do. That's the general spirit in which the Torah is given, and that's the general spirit in which we receive it. Questions up to here? Yeah.
It's one thing when you say, for example, that you do certain rules, and because you do those certain rules, it opens up possibilities. But what about the commandment? Like you said, there's commandments, and then there's decrees, and then there's decrees without any explanation. So how do we know what it opens us up to? Like, for example, not eating meat and milk. What does that open up to exactly?
Okay, it's an interesting question. Let me first scout the significance of the question. Let me give you an analogy. I go to the doctor, and he does a general workup. He says, listen, you're basically healthy. You have this and this condition, and he gives me this 16-syllable Latin name. And there's a medication for it. I'll give you a prescription. Go to the pharmacy and get the prescription. I take one pill a day for 6 months, and you'll be okay. So I go to the pharmacy, and I hand the prescription to the pharmacist. And the pharmacist says, oh, yeah, we have this stuff. Could I ask you a personal question? I say, you could ask. I might not answer, but you could ask. And the pharmacist says, do you really want this stuff? Do you honestly want this stuff? So I think, well, I don't know the condition that I have. I wasn't familiar with that 16-syllable Latin word. And I don't know the ingredients of the medication. And I don't know the physiology and chemistry that will describe how the medicine is going to affect my body so as to improve it. Do I really want it? Well, I don't want it on the basis of my own knowledge, but the doctor told me it's going to be good for me, and I trusted him. So yeah, I really do want it. I'm really honest in asking for it, not fooling, not deceiving myself. You can realize that there is a good value in something without knowing yourself what the good value is, if you have a reliable source that tells you so. So now, if I have a reliable source that tells me keeping kosher opens up important venues, I now know that it does open up public venues without knowing which those venues are. That's enough, logically, to make me motivated to do it, because I know that that's what it's doing for me, even though I don't know in detail what it's doing for me. Now, there's a gigantic Jewish literature on the reasons for the commandments and giving some description of some of those venues. There's a book called Sefer HaChinuch, which is translated, I think, as Book of Education. It goes through all 613 commandments and gives reasons for every one. And it is translated into English. So if you want to do research on these things, it's there, and it's not the only one. Maimonides devoted the last sixth of his Guide for the Perplexed to reasons for the commandments. Rav Hirsch does a lot of work with reasons for the commandments. So it's there, and you're invited to look at that literature and to increase your understanding. But it needn't be a precondition to know in detail what it opens up. All you need to know is that it opens something up. Yeah.
I think there's a difference between what's good for you and increasing your freedom. Like, just because, like, I don't know, Shabbat's good because it gives you more rest, right? It makes you more productive throughout the week, right? That's an example. That would be kind of fit into the whole narrative, right? You limit your freedom. You can't do work. You can't do 39 whole things, right? But the thing is, like,
you objectively do have less freedom. Like,
Hmm.
or like, it's not like you're gaining in these dichotomies. Same with like the language example. It's not I fight with the word that you're saying you gain freedom. You gain benefit from doing it. You gain a benefit from being able to use only half of the road. It's not that you gain freedom to it.
Well, let's think about it. First of all, I want to give another example, which maybe comes at Shabbos from a different angle. Think of sitting in a concert. I don't mean a concert where you get up and sing and dance on the steps and break them and so forth and so on. I mean Beethoven. You're pretty limited. You can't talk. You can't, sing. You can't play your phone on speaker and so forth and so on. But you're listening to Beethoven. Now, when you say about limiting or increasing freedom, how would you measure freedom? How much freedom do you have? One second. What does it mean to have more freedom or less freedom? One measure how much freedom you have is how many alternatives you have. If I give you $10,000, you now have alternatives you didn't have. And that means you have more things to choose among. And that's one way of measuring how much freedom you have. And my descriptions were descriptions of where new alternatives come into existence for you, alternatives you wouldn't have had. And that is an increase in freedom. I think that's straightforwardly a quantitative increase in freedom.
Like that point, going to the cinema, the opportunity is always listening to the music. It's only the benefit of being able to better understand the music when you're not speaking.
Yeah, I mean, you can't hear the Beethoven if you're talking to somebody else. You lost that alternative. You lost that possibility. One of the examples of futility that I used to give is somebody gets tickets for the Super Bowl, and he walks into the Super Bowl with a big package of old Time magazines. And he sits there in the Super Bowl reading the Time magazines. What would you think? A little odd, He probably spent $300 for the ticket. Is reading old Time magazines? Why is he doing that? The opportunity here is to enjoy the game, and he's reading old Time magazines. Something's unbalanced there, I probably heard CNN watching him and they'll write a story about him. Yeah. So now the question is, where do we take from this picture of what it means to develop spiritually, so that we can have a kind of vision of where we're going by operating with the rules of the Torah? Rav Dessler has a very interesting description of pleasure, similar, in certain ways, to John Stuart Mill. Levels of pleasure. You'll find people who will tell you, I believe I'm just a slightly smarter squirrel. That's what Darwin taught us. We're all products of evolution. We're all animals. Mordechai Becher's wife did a doctorate at the University of Toronto many years ago, and they told her, there are human animals and non-human animals. That's how you refer to them. Don't talk about people. There's no such thing. There's no human animals, non-human animals. To stress, they were all animals. So this guy says, I accept that. I identify with that. Yesterday I identified with a chair. Today I'm identifying as an animal. And we're all, and therefore, I'm committed to physical pleasure, just like animals are. All I care about is physical pleasure. So Dessler has the following example to start such a person thinking. Okay, it's August, and you're in southern Italy, and it's hot, and it's humid, and you're walking through a medium-sized town, and you're very hot, and you're very sweaty. You know that you would be considerably more comfortable if you disrobed. Just take off all your clothes. Well, you're an animal. All you care about is physical pleasure. I mean, I suppose there are people who would do that, but I think there are other people who wouldn't do it, right? Because it's embarrassing. Find me an embarrassed animal. Find me an embarrassed animal. I think you'll have a job trying to find an embarrassed animal. Right? I'll give you another example. This actually happened to me. This happened to other people. You're on a plane, and seatbelts are on, and you need to use the facilities. You need to urinate. and you can't get up. Well, physically you could relieve yourself where you are. You're not going to do that, no matter how painful it is. Now, how much physical pain it requires to hold it, you're not going to do that, because it'll be very embarrassing, right? No animal cares about that. Really? All you care about is physical pain and pleasure? Pain and pleasure? I don't think so. That's probably not right. Okay, so you're willing to endure considerable pain, physical pain and pleasure, pain or forego physical pleasure, in order to save your image, your reputation, your... Now, let's suppose you're in love with someone, really in love. And it's required, because of your love for that person, to do something that will cause people, you'll get a lot of dislikes, thumbs down on your Facebook account, right? Is it obvious that you would say, well, I just won't do it anyway, and so bad for my beloved? Can you imagine a person who would say, I love this person. I know this person loves me. I can't let my social image stop me from acting out my love for this person. What Rav Dess is pointing out, and again, what John Stuart Mill pointed out, is that there are levels of pleasure, and that it's not just quantity of pleasure that counts, but it's quality of pleasure that counts. Now, imagine, I don't know if you can imagine that, I don't know what your backgrounds are, I say, if I had an opportunity, a choice between the most sumptuous possible sirloin steak or 10 minutes of Beethoven, I'd take Beethoven every time. Every time. Without question. Why? That's just music. You're just listening to sounds. Here, you can eat sirloin steak. And you don't know Beethoven. That's your problem. You don't know Beethoven. If you knew Beethoven, you'd realize that there's really no comparison. Some people in mathematics call mathematical proofs beautiful. What are you talking about? It's words on a page. How can it be beautiful? It's not even a picture. It could be beautiful. Because a mathematical proof can take these ideas and integrate them and explain them, where you see the principles shining out at you of things that were just a mass of disconnected data before. And that's beautiful for some people, for people who are trained in it, who can see it, who can feel it. And when you talk to them, you see that they treasure this pleasure. You don't treasure the pleasure of the sirloin steak. You enjoy it. A week later, you've forgotten about it. This is something that you treasure. You go back to the same piece by Beethoven over and over and over again. You go back and read the proof and see how it fits together over and over again, because there's something to be treasured there. So there are higher elements in the human experience, and even if you don't personally possess some of these, you can use a criterion. This again goes back to John Stuart Mill, a criterion that could lead you to explore different realms of existence that you haven't explored yet. Suppose you have two items which are comparable, two books or two pieces of music or poetry or two statues or two games or whatever it is. And suppose everyone who's competent in both prefers one. There's one that's preferred by everyone. So you have Beethoven and the Beatles. Beatles music is really quite entertaining and clever and subtle in certain ways and moving in certain ways. But everyone who's competent in both Beethoven and the Beatles, and you're going to be on a desert island for 10 years, and you take along 10 hours of music, it'll be all Beethoven. Not even 9.5 Beethoven and a half hour Beatles, no, it'll be all Beethoven. Because Beethoven, for those who know both, is clearly superior. So now I say, but I prefer the Beatles. Okay, but human experience shows the reason you prefer the Beatles is because you don't appreciate Beethoven. Because if you did appreciate Beethoven, then you'd be like everybody else who appreciates both and prefers, at least that's what you should expect, since you haven't tried it. So that being the case, when you see that there are things where people who experience and appreciate both all prefer this one, you say to yourself, well then maybe there's something in there that's worth having. You can imagine someone in Dubai, today they're rich enough to go to Switzerland, but Dubai, seeing pictures of skiing. What's going on? They have these long pieces of wood strapped to their feet. Looks very clumsy, and and it's cold. Like the temperature, below freezing, and they're bundled up and they're falling down when they're sliding down the hill. Are these prison inmates and they're torturing them and punishing them? But wait a minute, look at their faces. They're smiling. They look happy. Maybe there's something there that's worth trying because all these people are doing it and they're smiling and they're happy. And since I'm in Dubai and my annual salary is $12 million, I can go also to Switzerland and try it out. Human experience leads you to see that there are things out there that you didn't appreciate. People who have a lot of facilities and who spend their time learning Torah or give up considerable other alternatives in order to learn Torah, and they're obviously competent in those alternatives because they were successful in those alternatives, are saying, at least from my point of view, this is more precious. Okay, so that should give a person pause. Maybe there's something very precious going on here. If these people have this kind of ability, and yet they choose this. That's one way to get a picture that there are things that the Torah can lead you to that have this tremendous value, and if you allow the Torah to lead you, you'll have an entree into those things as well. That's one of the reasons why we introduce people to Torah living by introducing them to Torah families, so they can see how the families interact with one another and how they live and communal activities. Get a picture of what the quality of life is with its spiritual elements, and so they can begin to appreciate what it would mean to be affected by this particular set of values which the Torah gives us. Questions? Yeah.
Can I disagree with you a little bit on something?
You're going to disagree whether I give you permission or not. Go ahead.
I don't really agree with the statement that just because someone might prefer something of, I guess, of their time is only because they don't appreciate, it was only because they don't appreciate something from the past. I don't really agree with that. I feel like people appreciate what they grew up with. For example, I prefer the music of my era a lot more than the music of my parents' era because I grew up with the music of my era.
Wait a second. I didn't say anything about past and future, past and present. I didn't use those terms at all. And I didn't say that the only reason that a person
Use the Beatles and the Beethoven.
So I said, this is what I said. If everyone who understands both prefers Beethoven, that's good reason to think there's something objectively in Beethoven that's superior to the Beatles. And if there is a person who prefers the Beatles, it's probably because he doesn't understand Beethoven, because everyone on record who understands both prefers Beethoven. So it's not a proof, but it's a very good piece of evidence that he doesn't understand Beethoven, because if he did, he'd be like all the other people who understand Beethoven. He might be different, it could happen, but it's very unlikely to happen. That's how preferences are achieved, right? So a person who's like that thinks, why are all these people listening to Beethoven instead of the Beatles? Ask them can they tell you what the themes are about the Beatles and what the music was and what the instrumentation was? Was it fast or slow? Was it moving well? Yeah, they can tell you all of that. They understand the Beatles well. They simply say, Beethoven's Beethoven. Right? So when you hear that, the honest person says, I have good reason to think that if I would invest the time to know Beethoven, then I would also have something that I would regard as very precious. Why should you think that all these people have this reaction to this thing and you won't? There's no reason to think that without trying. And it's especially with Shakespeare, for most people that pick up Shakespeare, they can't read it. The words don't hang together. Yeah, it takes a lot of effort to become able to read Shakespeare. But when you read Shakespeare, it's thrilling. It's thrilling. Yeah.
How is one supposed to define objective superiority or inferiority of an art form? And I take it that you're drawing a parallel between these art forms and Torah and another path to spirituality, right?
Right. So up until now, I've been speaking psychologically. I didn't speak objectively, but I think, and John Stuart Bill says that agrees with this. That's part of his purpose. That this is evidence that it's objectively superior. Now, how can you define it? Well, aesthetics is a backwater in philosophy, and a lot of work has been done, a lot of work has been thrown out. But if you understand art functionally, then you can talk about better or worse fulfillment of that function. And there are people, one of the people that I studied with was Nelson Goodman, who wrote a book called Languages of Art. One of the things that art is supposed to do is to teach you how to react to and interpret something which you didn't before, in ways that you didn't before. Picasso painted a picture of George Sand. George Sand's the name of a female author. And the reaction that he got from some was, it doesn't look anything like her. And he said, it will. He didn't mean she was going to be grotesque. What he meant was, you look at my picture and you'll see her differently. I'm expressing something about her that you haven't noticed. And when you look at my picture, you'll see her differently. Art is to teach you how to see things. That's one of its functions. Well, some art does that better and some art does that worse. So if that's one, then you can talk about the ones that change the perception of a world. Picasso's Guernica, the picture of the Spanish Civil War. You look at that picture, it's absolutely dreadful. It's dreadful. And if that teaches you something about war, how to relate to war, it's taught you something. Not every picture teaches you something. There's a picture, I forget the name of the artist, painting a picture of his wife with a sad face with a tear on her face. It's so pathetic. It's so pathetic. And you look at it and you stop and think, wow, that's what pain is like. And by the way, the picture can portray it more than real life. What's his name? The American painter. He has a picture called Milking Shed. The inside of a shed in which the milk is stored after it's been milked, and the door is open, the light's coming in, and it's in a wooden frame. And the wood he painted in the picture looks more wooden than the wooden frame does. He emphasized the woodness in the image in such a way that it stands out to you in ways that it doesn't in real wood. So if that's one of the things it's supposed to do, some pictures can do it better, some pictures can do it worse. Now someone else will say, well, that's not the only purpose of art, the other, okay, but you see where an objective judgment can come from. If it's supposed to do a certain job, some things will do it better than other things.
So are you implying that Torah in particular is more effective objectively at teaching morality or spirituality than the other sources?
Now, I wasn't going to apply aesthetic criteria to the Torah. This is now an aesthetic judgment. My criteria for the Torah is truth. I'll tell you one more story, and then I'm going to have to leave. I was in South Africa many years ago. I was there many times. I was there, and I was in a high school in Cape Town, and I was talking to the students. And one of the students said, Rabbi, what are you going to do? You're going to try to sell me heaven, right? We have the mountain, we have the beach, we have the sea, we have heaven right here. I don't need your religion, we've got it right here. The password in Cape Town at those times was, in the summertime, there's only one question: when to turn over? Because you're at the beach getting a suntan. When should you turn over and tan the other half of your body? That's all. There's nothing else. No Alps and no Seine River and the Tuileries and all the rest. Just when to turn over on the beach. I didn't think of the answer at the time, but I thought of it later. In the American First World War, there was a popular song about the soldiers who went to fight in Europe. How are you going to keep them down on the farm? After they've seen Paris. Got a guy who comes from Kansas. It's corn for 500 miles in every direction. He could be happy. He could be happy. He could be a successful farmer. He could have a nice living, have a nice family. But after he's seen Paris, he'll never go back to Kansas. He's only happy in Kansas because he hasn't seen Paris. What I should have said to him was, come to Jerusalem, spend 3 months with us, and see whether you'll be satisfied to spend the rest of your life wondering when to turn over on the beach. Now, the answer to that is, are you exploring other alternatives? Are you checking out other ways of life and so forth and so on? And the answer is no, because he's coming from the point of view of pleasure and happiness. And he claims he has all the pleasure and happiness that is needed. And I say there's more to be available. According to your search for pleasure and happiness, I'm not searching for pleasure and happiness. I'm searching for truth. And I think in the search for truth, I have studied other religions. I've written about it. And part of it's in my book that's just reprinted. And part of it's on a website where I did another 150 pages of evidence of other religions and Jewish historians and all the rest. I think that the aesthetic criterion is one thing, but that's not the criterion for judging everything. And a way of life with an objective history and with values aesthetics is not going to be the right criteria to use for making the evaluation. Yeah.
On the examples from a little bit before regarding the airplane in Italy, there are plenty of animals who will suppress what they want in order to get along with the group. So can you elaborate on what's really distinct there?
They don't suppress. The word suppress is a word of action. They don't choose. There's no evidence whatsoever that an animal could do other than what it does. Free will for us, that's an important qualification, but free will for us includes the idea that you could have done other than you did. So when an animal does what it does, you know from your own experience, you have certain challenges. Sometimes you do one way, sometimes you do the other way. And you know from your own experience that you could have done otherwise and you chose to do this way. That's why you chose. You chose because both paths were open to you. There's no evidence whatsoever that animals do anything like that. And I don't have to prove it's not so. The burden of proof is to somebody who says that someone has an ability, not to someone who says he doesn't have the ability. I'm not saying no. I'm just saying I have no reason to take it seriously until I have evidence that they do that. And there's no evidence that they do that. Okay, listen, have a wonderful Shavuos. I will see you, Mir Hashem, the night of Shavuos. I'll be here. And we'll share that time together.